Today's lesson is kind of a big day for Computer Science 1. What we do today is I'm going to show you how to read in values from a file. So up until now, most of the programs that we've done had some sort of get info method where the person sitting at the keyboard had to type in some values, some information, and the computer used that information to calculate an output. Now we're going to have all the input already stored into a file. So the user's not going to type in anything. We're going to read in all that information from the file, do our calculations with that, and then print out our results at the end. This is kind of how most programs going forward are going to be set up. So we're going to be doing this for the rest of ComSci 1, pretty much all of ComSci 2 and AP ComSci if you end up taking those classes. This is kind of a big day. So first you need a blank sheet of paper, so hopefully you have a piece of paper you can take some notes. If you don't have one, pause the video quick so you can get one. But once you have your paper, the top just writes file reading. It's going to be the title of the notes. And let me show you what we're actually doing too. So we're going to do a practice program today. And after I go through these notes, I'm going to give you a program that you're just going to type up in Eclipse to see if you can get used to the whole idea of file reading. But here's my file. It's called students1.dat. Now notice I've made a new project, and I'll go over this at the end too. We have a package. You call it CS1. I call this one file reader. And I also have a driver like I always do. So here's my regular old driver. My class name is going to be called file read test, so that's why I have that here. I've made a class called file read test that I'm going to have you type in later. And I also have this file called students1.dat. So here's what students1.dat looks like. It's basically just a small class of students. We've got all their names. We've got Oren Jello, Carrie Oki, Colette Ade, A Slift, and Juan Moment. And all these students have an integer after them that represents their age, and a double after them that represents their GPA, or their class average. Okay, so what this program does is it's going to read in all that information, and when I hit play, this is what comes up. We have all their information printed out in an organized, lined up pattern, and it's switched the order of their names, so they did directory style. So that's last name, first name, Jello, Oren. Then it has their age, it has their GPA, and in the end it did a little bit of calculation. It added up all the GPAs, divided by 5 in this case, printed out their average. So we're going to write a program that does that. So rather than just show you the code, I want to write out some of the code with you so I can explain line by line what's going on. So first off, anytime we want to do file reading, so back to your notes now, we need to import some methods and some classes that have already been written and they're common to Java that know how to read in from a file. So whenever you do file reading, you're going to have two imports up at the top. First, you're going to write import java.io.star asterisk. And what that does is that finds the directory java.java and then over to IO, and it takes all the classes that are written in the IO directory. That stands for input output. We also need to find the scanner class. So we need to import java.utilities.scanner, and that's a capital S there. So we're finding the scanner class. Okay, now next up, just like when you read in or when you had the user type in information, we always had to have variables to hold the stuff that we read in from the keyboard. We also need variables to hold the values that we're going to read in from the file. So for every person has a first name, a last name, an age, and a GPA. What type of variable do you think the first and last names are going to be? They're words, so we need to be strings. So we're going to have capital S for string. And I'm going to have a string for their first name, so I'm just going to call that string first. And I'm also going to have a string for the last name, so I'm going to call that string last. Next, we need a variable to hold the age that we read in. What type would that be? That'd be an int. So I'm going to have int age. And finally, we need a variable for their GPA. And that's going to be a double. Now, your program's probably going to have some other variables too, because we're going to have to calculate the class average. So we might need an accumulator, a couple accumulators, and an average variable. But that'll all be stuff you can fill in later on when you're writing the program. I'm really just focusing on the file reading aspect of these notes. Okay, so now we're ready for our run method. Public void run. The run method is going to start getting a little bit longer with file reading. Rather than only having a list of other methods, the run method is also going to contain all of the code for reading in from the file. Now we're still going to do other methods for like printing the data and calculating the average, things like that, but the file reading itself is going to happen right in the run method. Okay, so as we're getting ready to start this file reading, leave a little bit of space here. I'm going to add something in right here later on to leave at least just 1 or 2 lines here. But then the first major thing we have to do with the file reading is we have to tell the computer what file we're reading in from. And again, ours is called students1.dat. So how we do that is whenever you start file reading, you're going to have a scanner object. So it's a capital S for scanner again. I'm going to say scanner SC equals new scanner. So we're making a new instance of the scanner class. So SC is going to have access to all the methods in the scanner class. And then in parentheses, we have to make an instance of the file class also. So we're going to say new file. And then in parentheses again, this is where we write the name of the file. So in quotes, I'm going to write students1.dat because that's the name of our file. Students1.dat. And a dat file is just like a text file. Okay, so now I know I'm looking for students1.dat. Now, in order for the computer to correctly find that, you're going to have to get that file and paste it into your project in Eclipse. So let me show you that real quick. Wherever your Computer Science 1 folder is, you need to locate that. And you're looking for where it says input. And here's all the different files I can read in from. The one we care about today is students1.dat. So we're going to right click and copy that. And then in the project that you make in Eclipse, so I made a project called File Retest, you're going to click on the project name, not the package name, the project name, right click, paste it, and it should show up at the bottom, just like you did with Carol Worlds way back in the day. So again, you're going to right click on the name of the project, not the package name. Okay, so now students1.dat is part of our project, so the program will be able to find that when we need it. Okay, so next up, I know I want to read in, as long as there's stuff to read in here, I want to read in their first name, their last name, their age, and their GPA in that order. And it's important that you know how your file's set up, because you have to read it in that same order. So in this case, I know there's 5, so I could do a for loop running 5 times, every time reading in their first name, their last name, their age, and their GPA. But let's say this was a different file, a different class of students, and it wasn't always 5. What type of loop might be better to use? Hopefully you're thinking while loop. So if I don't know for sure how many things are going to be in my file, I want to use a while loop. And basically I want to say while there's stuff to read in from the file. Now, I obviously can't write the words, there's stuff to read in from the file. So I'm going to leave this blank for now also and fill that in at the end. Okay, but how I actually read in the values. The first thing in my file is their first name, and that's a string. So I'm going to take the variable that I created called first, and I'm going to say first equals sc.next with a double parenthesis. Now hopefully you realize that next is a method that's written in the scanner class, because sc is a scanner object, so it's a part of the scanner class. Next, the way that method is written in that class is it's going to take the next string it finds in your file until it finds a space. So if I've just opened the file, my cursor's at the start here, the next string it sees is Orin. It's going to read Orin in. Once it gets to a space, it's going to stop. So after this line of code happens in my program, first is going to be set equal to Orin. So similarly, the next thing in my file is the last name. I want to save that in the variable called last. I'm going to say last equals sc.next. And that's going to do the exact same thing. But now since our cursor was here after Orin, the next string it finds is Jello. And once it reaches a space, it stops. And now it's got Jello stored in last. What's the next thing in our file? 18, which is Orin Jello's age. So we need to save that in the age variable. So I'm going to say age equals, but since age isn't a string, this next is only to read in strings. Since age is an int, there's another method called in the class, so sc dot, it's called next int, the capital I. And that's going to do the same thing that next did, but it's going to take it in as an integer. And then what do you think the last thing is going to be? Well, now I need to read in their GPA, which is a double. So that's going to be stored in the GPA variable. So I'm going to see GPA equals sc dot, what do you think it's going to be? Next double. And you can basically do that with any type of variable you want to read in. Next int, next double, next character. I don't know why string doesn't say next string, it's just next. That's the one that's a little weird. Okay, now I've got all of Orange Jello's information stored in here. Next, what I would want to do is I'd want to do the calculations that I need to do, so the GPA calculations. I'd want to print out his information, because the next time through I'm going to read in whoever the next person, karaoke's stuff in these variables. So in order not to lose them and be able to print out like I want to, I'm going to have to print out their information also. So what would really happen next inside this while loop is I would do some calculations, I would print their information. That's not really what I'm focusing on in these notes, so I'm just going to put a comment, and I'm just going to write calculate and print stuff. And I'd probably make new methods for those also, because even though this is still our run method, which is a lot bigger than we're used to, I still want to break it into smaller tasks. So I should have the file reading in the run method, but any calculations or print stuff should be in other methods still. And you'll see that when you type up the program later. That's what will come next. All right, so I'm going to do that for every individual person. And then at the end, we need to print out the average. So that's nothing to do with file reading also, so I'm not really going to talk about that. But outside the while loop, we'll have a print average. And I might just do that in the run method. I might make another method to do that, but we don't want that to happen once at the end, so that's why that's going to happen outside the while loop. Okay, now all of this is all well and good. I said there was a couple things I was going to fill in for you, and this is where it gets a little bit weird. So the first thing, let's fill in this while loop. So I said we have to read in all this stuff while there's stuff to read in. Well, there's a Boolean method in the scanner class called sc.hasNext. So anytime we use a while loop and want to say while there's stuff to read in, the condition we're checking is while sc.hasNext, which is basically just going to say while the file you're reading has something next, while there's something still to read in. So that's going to be common to a lot of your file reading. The other thing is Eclipse is going to give you an error with this first line we wrote if it's not inside a special type of loop. So the computer is really nervous. It's really anxious that, well, you're telling me to read in from this file. What if I try to find this file and it's not there? Or what if I try to read in from students1.dat and I'm looking for the first thing to be a string for its first name and the first thing happens to be a number? What do I do then? The computer is very nervous that it needs to have some sort of out if it encounters an error in here. So you need to try to calm the computer and say, hey, computer, don't worry. It's not a big deal. Just give it a try. See if it works. So that's exactly what you're going to tell the computer. You're going to say, hey, no worries if there's something wrong. Just try it. So before all of this, we're going to have just like an if-else. It's going to be in a try loop. So we're just going to try to read in from this file. Try to read in all these variables. If it works, great. We'll all be happy. If not, we're going to catch the error. So just like if-else, we're going to try catch. If all of this works and there's no error, it's only going to do the try. But if it encounters some error, we're going to catch the error. So we're always going to write catch IO exception, which is all one word. Note the capitals there. An IO exception is a weird sort of variable, like an int or a double or a char. It's an error variable. So I need to make it a name. I'm going to call it E, but I could call it X or error or whatever I want to call it. And that's going to catch the error that happens, which might be the file's not found. Sometimes you'll see type mismatch, which means you're trying to read in an integer when it's really a string or something like that. If you want to see what the error actually is, in the catch, we can print out that E variable we just did. System.out.print. Let's do print ln. I'm going to print out E. And E will say the actual error. It'll say type mismatched or file not found or whatever. But what I just wrote in red is all very important stuff that you're going to have anytime you're file reading. And most of the time you're just going to copy and paste that in from previous programs. But just realize that that's there and that needs to happen. Okay, so we can end the run method after that. That's pretty much the program. Now, one other thing I want to talk about before I send you off to start typing, another thing you're going to see in this program that you haven't seen before are some special formatting characters. So I want to talk about those quick. So these are special characters for formatting. So first off, you're going to see in some system.out.prints in quotes, you're going to see \t. And that is just a tab. So that's how I got all the students' names to line up so nicely, is that I tabbed over after their last name, their first name, their age, things like that. If you want more than one tab, you can do \t. And that would give you two tabs. Tab. And you can do as many of those as you want if you want a bunch of tabs. Now the other thing that's going to be a little bit helpful for us going forward, you know how when you're formatting, you sometimes have to put in system.out.println with nothing inside it just so you can get that new line? Well, there's also something called \n, which will give you a new line. And same with tabs. If I want multiple new lines, I can do \n, \n as many times as I want. And I can do that so that I can get my next output to print out on the next line without doing that system.out.println with nothing inside it. So in a minute, I'm going to give you a piece of paper, or you're going to get a piece of paper with all of the code to type in. Let me show you what it looks like. So most of this is exactly what you saw. So we've got our imports up at the top. There's those variables that I made. Now, notice I also have a couple other ones to calculate the average. There's our run method with our try, that while sc.has next, you can see the try catch. Most of this is what I had just written out for you, but there's the calculations to find the class average, print out their individual data, calculate the average in the end. But let's look at the print methods real quick, because that's where these tabs are. So in order to get that last name, first name, all that to print out nicely, that's why I have these \t's in between their variables. And at the end, I have a new line. So that accomplishes a few things. The tabs make all these things line up, and you can see there's 2 tabs here. That's why these are kind of spaced out a little bit more. That \n gives me this empty line in between all of those. If I took this out, so no \n there, and then run it, now there's no spaces in between, which maybe looks a little bit cleaner even, but you can decide which way you like better. I think the stuff I have for you has this in there, so I'm just going to put it back. Let's say you wanted to put some tabs before the averages. Right now, it prints out right on the left there. If I do \t, \t, so I can go crazy with my \t's if I want. And then print it again. Now it's all the way tabbed over there. So that's how I can kind of move stuff around the screen a little bit if I want. Now that looks stupid, so I don't want to do that. So I'm going to take that out, but same with the new lines. If I wanted to make a bunch of new lines before this averages thing prints out, I can do a bunch of \n's. And that moves it all the way down here, which is a lot faster and cleaner than typing a lot of system.out.println's with nothing inside it. Okay, but without those in there, that's what your program should look like when you press play. And what I want you to do now is get this paper. So this is the file retest. It's just the exact thing I just showed you. What you're going to do is you're going to go to Eclipse. You're going to make a new Java project like you always do. We're going to call it file read test. And then you're going to make a new package on that file read test. And you can call it CS1. The only reason I have file reader there is because, well, in my package is the one that I'm going to give you, it says CS1. So you should probably call your package CS1. Maybe in an old version I called it file reader. But just name your package CS1 like you usually do. Make a driver. And your driver you can copy and paste in from your Pi program or whatever one you've done, or guessing game, whatever you want, but you're going to change it to file read test. The rest of that hasn't changed. And then in file read test, yours should be totally empty except for the package and public class file read test. You're going to literally just look at what I have here, and you're going to copy this in, typing it in as you go. I want you to get used to all of these values, see the errors that pop up and whatnot. And once you have it running, hit play. If you get this working, raise your hand and call me over so that I can check you off that you've got the file read test working and everything's good. And then you're good today, good to go. So no new homework with this, but in the next video I'll show you the next program we're going to do and how you're going to use this file reading to do it. As always, if you have any questions, I know today was a little bit weird probably for you, please mark them down or raise your hand and call me over so that I can clear up anything you have. Okay? But if you don't have any questions right now, you should be getting that, that worksheet that's called file read test, making your Java stuff and typing this up so that you get used to having file reading in your programs. All right, have fun.